Hi, I'm Chad with Move for Guitar. This lesson is from our series Music Theory for Guitar. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can use the modes of the major scale to solo over static minor chords. First off, if you like the diagrams for everything in this series, including the diagrams for this lesson, you can download our free e-guide, Music Theory for Guitar. And this e-guide will be something that you can study and use as a reference for years to come. And like I said, it's free, so there's no reason not to just go download it. This is part 5.15 from our series, Music Theory for Guitar. If you'd like to go back and start at the beginning, you can click the link on the screen. So in the last lesson, we looked at options for soloing over major chords. We looked at the major modes that you can use from the major scale to solo over major chords. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with minor chords and the minor modes. And I'm going to go quicker through this lesson since if you watched the last lesson, you should already understand the basic concept. But it's important to be able to look at this for the minor modes as well. So if you were to solo over a minor triad, which is just a root, a flat 3, and a 5th, you have the option of using any of the minor modes because the root, flat 3, 5 are out of every minor mode. Every minor mode, if you were to build a chord starting on the root, would build a minor triad because they have root, flat 3, and 5. So you could use Dorian, you could use Phrygian, or you could use Aeolian. And each one is going to produce a totally different sound over that minor chord. And again, we're just talking about soloing over a static minor chord, no other harmony going on, just one chord looping over and over, which is called a one-chord vamp. So if you were to use Dorian over a minor triad, you don't have any avoid notes to worry about because the Dorian doesn't have any avoid notes, so you could land on any tone and not worry about it. Just use your ear and what sounds best to you. If you are using Phrygian, you have to be really careful about the flat 2 and the flat 6. Those are avoid notes. It doesn't mean don't play them because those produce the sound of Phrygian, but if you just land there and stay on them, it's going to be really dissonant because the flat 2 is a minor second away from the root, which is part of the chord, and the flat 6 is a minor second away from the 5th, which is part of the chord. So those are very dissonant intervals. But the Phrygian is going to give you a more exotic world type of sound. It's going to be the Spanish flamenco type of sound or Middle Eastern type of sound. The Dorian is going to be more of just a jazzy minor bright sound. Then your other option to use is Aeolian, and this time it's your flat 6 that is the avoid note. For the same reason the flat 6 of Phrygian is a void note, that it's only a minor second away from the 5th, which is in the chord. And Aeolian is a darker sound than Dorian, not as dark as Phrygian, and it's a very common sound. It's used all the time, so I think it's one that you'd probably like if you used it. So that means if you were soloing over a G minor chord, the root, the flat 3, and 5th of G minor is G, B flat, D. You would use G Dorian, G Phrygian, or G Aeolian. You'd have the option of any of those over that static chord. All of the modes contain the G, B flat, D, which of course are your chord tones and your most stable, meaning that they're going to be safe to land on anytime. It's not going to sound bad, but it's not going to produce any color of the mode because they all have that in them. So if you want to differentiate the modes, you have to really emphasize the unique characteristic of each mode. And for Dorian, that's the major 6th. It's the only minor mode with the major 6 or major 13th. Phrygian, that's the flat 2. And the flat 6 help with that sound. And Aeolian, it's the natural 2 along with the flat 6. Then if you were to solo over a static minor 7th chord, again, you can use any of the modes. You could use Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian, because building chords off the first note of each of the modes, you get minor 7ths. Unlike the major modes, you got two different types of 7th chords. You got either major 7th or dominant 7th. The minor modes all build minor 7th chords. So if you're soloing over a static minor 7th chord, you can still use any of the modes, any of the minor modes, just like when you're soloing over a minor triad. Then I have this chart with all the minor chords, the ones that we went over through this series, the most common and popular ones you'll find. It's not all the minor chords by any means, but these are the ones you should learn first because they're most common. And again, I've shown you the chord name and then the formula, and what mode options you have to solo over. So again, minor triad, you can use any of the modes. Minor 6, you can only use Dorian because the minor 6 has a major sixth in it, and Dorian is the only minor mode with the major 6. The others have minor 6, so that the other modes wouldn't work over a minor 6 chord. Those would produce minor flat 6 chords, which are much less common and much more dissonant. Minor 7th, of course you have all the modes, I already mentioned that. Minor 6 add 9, Dorian, again because of that 6. Minor add 9 is Dorian or Aeolian because Phrygian has a flat 9, and a minor add 9 has the natural 9, so you'd have to use either Dorian or Aeolian. And then you can just go through each one of those and review it on your own. And then the other types of chords with the suspendeds and the power chord, you can still use minor modes over these chords as well as major modes like I showed you in the last lesson. So for suspended second, you could use either Dorian or Aeolian. You can't use Phrygian because Phrygian has that flat 2, so that wouldn't work along with this major second. But again, be careful about using the thirds from these modes when you're over a suspended chord because that takes away the sound of the suspended chord. Suspended fourth, you could use any of the modes. You have a root perfect fourth and perfect fifth from any of the minor modes. 7 suspended 4, you could use any of the minor modes. And power chord, you could use any of the minor modes. And for any of these situations, you just have to listen to what fits best in that situation. If you're playing by yourself, you have control over what's going on. If you're playing with other musicians, you really have to listen to what they're doing as well, because they might choose to go one direction that locks in what you have to do. So that's more advanced than this lesson is talking about. We'll get into that in another series, but this is the basic concept that if you come across these static chords, these are the mode options that you have. So those are the mode options for soloing over minor chords. Go ahead and move on to the next lesson where I'm going to talk about your mode option for soloing over a half diminished chord. And be sure to download the e-guide. All these diagrams are in there, and be sure to subscribe because we had at least one new lesson every day.